How are you reading this?
Well, I mean, basically, we see President Trump throwing a Hail Mary, and we see the North Koreans basically caught even, I think, by surprise that the president is actually entertaining this offer. But nonetheless, they're forging ahead. Now, this isn't entirely, a reason to be overly cynical about the prospects. I mean, yes, there are a lot of constraints layering this diplomatic dialogue. And when North Korea says denuclearization, there are a lot of things entailed in that kind of a demand. That could include the U.S.'s nuclear umbrella in the region. So that would have big consequence, of course, for the regional powers, Japan and South Korea. That would also mean likely the U.S. withdrawal of its forces from the Korean Peninsula, which is a very tall order for the United States to make. And so, yes, the North Koreans are acting like this could be some big rapprochement, that there could be a big deal on the table. And the United States could entertain something very strategic, like an alignment against China, which would be very worrying, of course, for Beijing and even regional powers like Japan. But still, there is so much riding on the demands on each side. And it's really not clear that North Korea is very legitimately going to be able to agree to denuclearization, and the U.S. on the other side, when you consider just what's entailed in those big demands.
That's one of the interesting things, right? We haven't heard too much from other countries about what they think of this potential summit. At the same time, I'm sure the White House has received calls from some angry players on the world stage.
Well, of course, and that's where everyone is basically saying, well, whoa, what are you doing? You're rushing into this. But this is a really bad hand that President Trump was dealt with in the first place. When we look at just the number of years that have built up to this point where North Korea is really on the verge of crossing that nuclear finish line. So I think the mentality is, well, why not? If this is a last-ditch effort, what do we have to lose? And again, I mean, there is a strategic threat building in this region where the United States does see China as an emerging power in this peer-to-peer competition. It has a lot of common interest with Russia as well. A potentially unified Korea would pose a big threat to China. It would be a very strategic component of a broader containment strategy. But again, just the demands that we see going into this are going to be hard to resolve. And Japan is not comfortable with that prospect of a unified Korea under a U.S. umbrella. Certainly China's not, and they're trying to edge their way into this conversation as best as they can.
Reva, how will Iran be looking on at the prospects of a Trump-Kim meeting? Are the prospects good when it comes to the Iranian nuclear deal for it to be kept alive?
It's a great question, because the two issues are very much linked in a way. And if you're looking at North Korea and you really put yourself in Kim Jong-un's shoes, and you look at the White House's handling of the Iran nuclear deal and the JCPOA, which is really pulling the rug out from that nuclear deal and, in effect, stripping away the implicit security guarantees that Tehran thought it had with the United States under the previous administration, that doesn't inspire a whole lot of confidence for this diplomatic dialogue between the United States and North Korea on a very long, involved process on denuclearization. So, Iran is, of course, looking at this and saying, well, why am I the target when there's a prospect of a bigger deal? But I don't think you're going to see any shift from the U.S.'s position when it comes to Iran. They're very much coordinated with the Saudis and with the Israelis to double down on the pressure on Iran and try to revise that nuclear deal, or at least pile sanctions up around it. And the ballistic missile program is really the key sticking point within that.
And Reva, we're talking about denuclearization. At the same time, Putin is, showing off his upgraded weapons technology. How does that play into the world's arms treaties? It suggests that there's going to be a race to sort of outdo each other.
And this is a trend that's been long in the making. You see with Russia, China, the United States, all three developing a number of different types of disruptive weapons technology that have been undermining existing arms control pacts. And this has been something that's been going on between the United States and Russia for a very long time. And we can see this already with, existing pacts and, holdups over the New START treaty. And so, as the United States is going to have to adapt potentially to some kind of containment strategy against a nuclear North Korea if this dialogue doesn't work out, and there's a low likelihood that it does work out, then the U.S. is going to have to build up its ballistic missile defenses in the region. And that, in turn, undermines the defenses of China and Russia. So they're building up their defenses. And the overall effect is that you have a breakdown of arms control pacts, and China's not even party to those pacts. And so you have overall this 21st century nuclear non-proliferation concern that's very much centered in this region across Eurasia. You still have outstanding issues like Iran, of course, and very notably, you see the Saudis now piping up and saying, well, we want a civilian nuclear program predicated on the JCPOA where we can enrich our own uranium. And that, of course, is an issue where the United States is going to want to make sure it's the best position to strike that deal with the Saudis, not the Russians.